Next assignment, creating a quiz, and this quiz is going to be based on how many moons each planet in our solar system has. So this is the time we're going to start to combine all of the JavaScript you've learned so far this semester and create a complete functioning program. So what we need is a quiz that's going to ask questions, take the input, and measure the person's performance. So there's a couple ways you could do this. First off, we want to know what the program is supposed to do. First, we want to ask somebody a question. So in order to ask someone a question, we're going to use the function that's built in to JavaScript called prompt. And the next thing we're going to need is a list of questions. And so since it's a list, we're going to use arrays because they are good at storing multiple elements of information. So you may not know the answers to these, so I went through and provided these for you. So how many moons do each of the following planets have? Here's your list of the planet and the number of moons. So the next thing we want the program to do is to let the quiz taker know if they're right or wrong. So after you get an answer from the quiz taker, you have to figure this out. So this is where, if answer is this, do something, otherwise do something else. So we're going to use a conditional statement there potentially. And then we also need to let them know if they're right or wrong. So we can use the built-in alert function that we've used early on this semester. And finally, we want to output the results of the quiz so they can determine how well they're doing. So we're going to need a variable that keeps track of the correct responses. And then finally, we need to tally those responses and show them their total. So like I mentioned, there's a couple ways that we could solve this, actually multiple ways we could solve this. We could use a brute force approach where we just use a whole big series of if-else statements and variables for each question. But that could get kind of messy. If you take a look at this example, we're declaring an answer and then starting the prompt, and then if the answer or the value that somebody puts in for the answer is equal to 1, we say correct. Otherwise, alert, and we tell them the answer. Then the next one says for the second question, prompt, and then if they answer 31, they get it correct. Otherwise, we tell them the answer. So that could be a little bit of time-consuming code to write for all of these potential questions. So seems logical. It seems like this would be the rough format and order that we would want to take, but we definitely don't want to use the brute force approach. So let's take a look at what we should do first. So let's go over to VS Code, and in week 11, let's create a folder called quiz. And inside that folder, let's create a file called index.html. And we'll use the HTML5 boilerplate, give it a title, moon quiz, and then the last name. And I don't think we'll need a style sheet, so we can comment that out. And then down here at the bottom of the page, we don't need all that extra attribute content for the script tag. So we're just going to write all the script here at the bottom of the page. So first thing we will do is we need to set the scoreboard. So we're going to start with bar of score equal to 0. And this stores the number of answers the quiz taker gets right. So at the beginning of the quiz, we need to reset it. And the next thing we're going to do is add the questions. So we'll set var questions equal to, and then our square brackets here. And we're going to store all these in an array. We'll fill in the blanks here. So each question also has an answer to it. So not only will we store the question text, but we'll store its answer. This is going to be done using a multi-dimensional array. So the first question and answer pair, it will also reside in a pair of brackets. So it's going to be a kind of a sub-array. So in here we're going to use a string. We're going to say how many moons does Earth have? Question mark. And we're going to say 1 moon. And then our next item will follow that. So we're going to do a whole comma-separated list. I'm going to put all of these questions over on the right here so we can see them all. And I'm going to need 9. And I suppose we could go in the same order from closest to furthest. So let's start with Mercury. And it has 0 moons. So don't forget these answer values are numbers, so they don't need to be in quotes. So Venus has 0 moons. Earth has 1. Mars has 2. Jupiter has 79. Saturn has 62. Venus has 14. Pluto has 5. And skip in here. Neptune has 14. So I'm off of my values here. So Uranus has 27. Neptune has 14. Pluto has 5. So since Pluto is the last in the list, we want to delete the last comma there for the separated list, and then save our array here. So now we have our list of questions, and we can begin to start with a loop. So this is how we're going to traverse or travel through all of these different questions and check each answer that's submitted. So at the end of the array here, we will start our loop. We're going to do a simple for loop. So that means we need a condition and then our code block. So we're going to say var of I 0, and then we're going to run this for the length of the questions that we have. So I'm going to say I is going to be less than questions length, and then I++, because we're going to count forward in the loop. So we're going to start on 0 and continue after that. So next thing we want to do is insert the code that does all of our heavy lifting for us. And what we want to do is create a function within our loop here. So we're going to call this ask question. And what we want it to do is tell us the value for the first array and its first value. So what that means is we want 0, 0 to be returned. That's going to be in our square brackets. So what we can do then is say ask question, and then we want questions and the array. So the first time this loop runs, I is 0, so this means it's going to give me questions 0 out of our list. So we're going to end that. And so now this is going to ask every time for as long as we have questions available. So now you're probably wondering, we haven't defined this function yet, so we'll just insert this above here. So we're going to say function ask question, and put our braces here. So in this function, we're actually going to require a parameter. We're going to call it question. And what we want it to do is pass in the 0th question, the first question, second, third, on down the list. So it's going to pass in 0 the first time it runs. And the functional part of this is where we're going to actually make it use the prompt and tell us the first question in the list here. So we're going to set this to record the person's value that they enter in that prompt as the answer. So we'll do this by saying var answer is equal to prompt, and then prompt is going to go and ask up here for question 0. So we're going to say question square bracket 0. So that's the first time it runs. And prompt requires 2 parameters. One is what's popped up and the form of the question. And then we can also pre-fill the blank with the value. So in this one, in the quotes, the value is going to be empty. So now whatever somebody types in gets saved as the value of answer. So from this point, we want to continue and put some logic in here that says if they get the answer right, tell them. Otherwise, tell them they're sorry and notify them of the right answer. So we're going to do if something, do this, else, do that. So again, this is all happening inside of the function. So function opens here, closes here, and then our criteria will be if the answer is exactly the value for question subarray 1, square bracket there, then we're going to pop up an alert and say correct. And then we need to manipulate their score. So we're going to add 1 to the score, so we're going to do score plus plus. But if they get it wrong, we're going to alert them to that too. We're going to say sorry, the correct answer is. And we're going to concatenate this together, and we want to get them the value for the second portion of the subarray here. So we're going to say question square bracket 1. And then outside of that, we're going to put in our semicolon. I don't think we need a preview there. So this is just our basic if-else. And now what we want to do is show the final score here. Actually, no. Actually, we should test this. So let's see what happens. Because I'm wondering if we're already passing 0s and 1s in here, is that going to be enough to go through and loop through all of our questions? So let's preview. And not getting a prompt. So it says line 47, ask question is not defined. Could have to spell question right. Say that. Refresh. Okay. So it says, how many moons does Mercury have? I'm going to cheat and look at all the answers. Uh-oh. I put in 0, and it says, sorry, the correct answer is 0. Let's see if it continues. How many moons does Venus have? and we'll say 0. Sorry, correct answer is 0. Kind of think I know what's going on here, but let's try and put in a correct answer. So Earth, sorry, the correct answer is 1. So what I'm guessing, just go through all these questions, and that finishes our quiz. So what I'm guessing is when we're checking for our value here of what is prompted, this is coming through, my answer is coming through as a string. So we might remember there was a method that we used to force that to the value of a number instead of a string. So you see here, we are checking for strict equality. We're saying triple equals. So if my answer that I'm prompting is that, and it's equal to questions, that could be my, no, that's not going to be it. Maybe it's a little typo. Because that should be questions array, plural. Okay, so I'll try again. Mercury has 0. Suppose I started the correct answer is 0. Okay, so we're still stuck with passing a string. Let's get all those answers here. So we need to convert prompt to number in the JavaScript statement. So take a look at Stack Overflow here. So parse int could be an option here. But there was another value I thought we did. Some logic here. Looks like parse integer would be the best way to do that. So what we want to do is convert answer to be parse int. So we're going to take and say parse int from answer. So we're going to force the prompted answer to be an integer. And then we're going to check and see if it's equal to that. Give that a shot. Okay, so Mercury has 0. Hey, I got it right. Venus has 0. Got it right. Earth has 1. Mars has 3. Let's say. Okay, correct answer is 2. So that seems to have fixed our problem. So now we have a pretty good functional quiz. The next thing that we need to do is show the results to the person taking the quiz to see how many they got right. So in the script, in the body of the web page, we print out the results. So down here, after our loop, we're going to say bar message equals you got, and then the score value. So that's our message. And then the next thing we need to do is fill in the blanks for the message. And we're going to do a kind of a range, how many right out of how many questions. So we're going to say message plus equal. We're going to append a new value here. It says you got a certain number, and then a space out of, and then we're going to concatenate to the length of the questions. So you got X number out of X number of questions. And the next thing we want to do is have it tell them the number of questions that are correct. So we're going to do one more concat plus equal, and so questions correct. Make this a full sentence. So we're going to say you got 10 out of X questions correct. Then the final thing is we want to output this on the page. So we could do this in the console, but we'll do this as a document write. And we'll say we're going to put this into a paragraph, and then output our message as part of that concatenation, and then close the paragraph tag. So now let's see. Name is 0, 0, 1, 2, 29, 2, 3. Alright. So now you've got 4 out of 9 questions correct. So you got 4 out of 9 questions correct. So the loop in this is super simple, but only because we're using a function to pass in everything else. So this basic loop here is the grunt work here happens in the function. So ultimately what's happening is it's going through every line or outer array every time it loops until it's out of questions. And then it passes the question number. So the first time it runs, it's going to be 0 here. So it says ask question 0. And so the answer says, give me the question for 0, which is this 0 value of the subarray. So every time it runs, it's just giving me 0 for that, 0 for that, 0, 0, 0, all the way down. And then it compares that question's subarray value of 0, 0, 1, 2, 79, 62, 27, 14, and 5. So then it alerts them that they got it right if that's true. Sets the score, increments by 1, tells them they got it wrong otherwise. And then this loop keeps running. So it's kind of a double loop happening in here. And then at the very end, get our message.